Yo, welcome back to the TV show, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Homeland, book number 1 in the Legend of Drizzt series. This is also book number, which is the Legend of Drizzt series is like a 30-book series. This is book number 1 in that series. It even says so right there. Probably on the back too, book 1. It's also book number 1 in the Dark Elf Trilogy, which I have right here, which comprises Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn. These are the 3 books that start the Dark Elf Trilogy, Legends of Drizzt. Now, on my channel before, I actually reviewed book number 4, The Crystal Shard. This is the first Drizzt book I ever reviewed, book number 4, The Crystal Shard. You can probably, the most requested video I've ever had is, hey, everyone, review The Crystal Shard. And I did, so you can see that review elsewhere. What I wanted to do is I enjoyed this book so much, rereading it. I remember reading it as a kid, and I just reread it. And now I enjoyed it so much, I wanted to start and reread, well, read for the first time, because I've only read the Crystal Shard trilogy prior. Prior to this, I've only read books 4, 5, and 6. That's like watching Star Wars, and you see movies 4, 5, and 6, and then you go back and you read. So I watched. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. This is a convoluted series. Parts of the middle of it were written first. Some of it was written last. This came out in 1990. Let's get on with the review. Let's talk about the covers first, because you know I love graphic design and cover illustration. I love this series because they re-released every book with these snazzy spines that all look nice together. Every single book with a Todd Lockwood illustration, and he's one of the great illustrators. We've got Drizzt there with his panther. Just a great looking set of books all around. Every Todd Lockwood painting better than the next. I mean, this one is super fly. Just love it. I've got the first 13 out of 30 some odd. God, I think there might be 38 in the series. So, it's got a map too. We've got to give a shout out for the map. It's got a map of the city of Menzoberranzan, the underground city of the Drow. So let's talk about the history of this book a little bit. So, now, when R.A. Salvatore was first hired by TSR, Dungeons & Dragons, to write in the Forgotten Realms universe, he came up with the story, and Wulfgar, who was the main character in The Crystal Shard, was the main character. And they looked at his notes and his part of it, and they said, hey, Wulfgar needs a sidekick. Oh, no, a phone call. I just read the book Slaying the Dragon, which is the history of Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm getting this information from that book. So R.A. Salvatore took a phone call from the editor, and the editor said, hey, Wulfgar needs a sidekick. And R.A. Salvatore, just off the top of his head, he hadn't thought of it. He's like, well, how about the sidekick be a Drow? And the Drow in Dungeons and Dragons universe was a dark elf that lived underground and worshipped the Spider Queen. And they were always evil. They were like the most evil characters in the Dungeons and Dragons universe. And the editor was like, what, you want to make that the sidekick? And he's like, yeah. And they're like, all right, well, what is its name going to be? And just off the top of his head, R.A. Salvatore said, well, Drizzt Diorden. And they're like, good, go for it. And he's like, that's how one of the most memorable characters in the history of fantasy, in the history of the fantasy and in the world, was born, was just off the top of his head. Just, hey, we need a sidekick. How about a Drow? Hey, what's its name? Drizzt Diorden. Good. And a legend was born. So he turned in the manuscript for the Crystal Shard, and they loved it. And they were like, this is a great manuscript. However, we love the character Drizzt Diorden, the Drow. When you do your rewrites, add more Drizzt to the story. And eventually, you'll find out that Drizzt took over the entire Forgotten Realms universe. And like I said, legend was born. So, who is Drizzt? This trilogy is the story of his beginnings. Down in Menzoberranzan, the underground city. Oh my gosh, I loved this underground city. I just got to read the first few pages here. This review might go a little long because I got a lot to say about this book. So, never does a star grace this land with a poet's light of twinkling mysteries, nor does the sun send to hear its rays of warmth and life. This is the Underdark, the secret world beneath the bustling surface of the Forgotten Realms, whose sky is a ceiling of heartless stone, and whose walls show the gray blandness of death in the torchlight of the foolish surface dwellers that stumble down here. This is not their world, not the world of light. Most who come here uninvited do not return. So, the Drow live in these vast caves and caverns under the ground. Some of the caverns are so big that they can have cities. Cities that are so big that 50,000 people or Drow can live in them. And the stalactites just hang down, or the stalagmites shoot up out of this, and it's just, they carve into those castles and pathways and all sorts of stuff. Down underneath, they've got orcs and goblins that they keep as their slaves to build and carve all of these things, and there's a lot of different things. They ride lizards. To get around, they just ride lizards. It's just, when I read the first introduction to the book, I was down. I just read it to you. I was like, I'm down. I want to know everything about this underground city that Drizzt is living in. And we start out with learning a little bit about the Spider Queen. Because they worship spiders. The Drow worships the spider and the Spider Queen. And they have two things that they also sort of worship. One is station. I'll explain that in a minute. And the other is assassination. So station, the basic theory behind station is it's the limitation of power within the hunger for power. And then assassination, which they also worship, is kind of like, if, assassination. Who wouldn't worship that if you had assassins? Anyway, it starts out with Dinin Duorden. He is, if I remember correctly, he is Drizzt's older brother, and this starts before Drizzt is born. And there's the House Duorden and the House Devere, I think it's Devere. They are, battling it out in this underground city. There's a fight. There's an overthrowing of the House Lords and assassinations going on. And during the fight, the baby is born. The baby Drizzt is born, and he is to be sacrificed to Loth, the Spider Queen, to help the Duordens win the battle, to overthrow the other house. And but he is saved from the sacrifice. He's got purple eyes. They're all like, why has he got purple eyes? Nobody's ever had purple eyes before. Something's wrong with him. Is he blind? Any Drow that's born that shows any sort of weakness, they just kill. I mean, they're a ruthless group of dark elves, and live underground. I worship spider, and there's a brutality to this world that I really, really appreciated. And there's a paganism to it that I really appreciated. And there's a darkness to it. Well, it's in underground. And he did it, and Lockwood did a great job of sort of painting this wraparound cover where we see some of the underground caverns and stuff. And we even get it in this book here too, with the underground look. And then eventually, I guess by book 3, maybe he makes it above ground because there's sunlight. Anyway, so Drizzt is going to be sacrificed. He's not. He ends up at about 63 pages in. So all that takes place for about 63 pages. At 63 pages in, then we get to meet Drizzt as he is a 5-year-old. And he's being taught, I would guess, what you would equivocate to sort of Jedi powers by his sister Virna. And so there's a montage. There's like about a 10-page montage of training. It's kind of like in any Rocky movie or any one of those movies where the training montage shows up, and there's some we get that. And it's actually written down as like this short little 10-page of him sort of training, like with, it's like him and his sister are sort of like Luke Skywalker and Yoda, and they're training to levitate things and use his magic. And he shows a good ability for magic. And then by page 72, the training montage is over, and we jump to when he's 16 years old, and he now hates his sister because she's been sort of a brutal trainer. He's got Zaknafale is the another trainer that he has. I think that might be another one of his brothers or cousins or something. But that guy teaches him in weapons, and he shows an aptitude towards weapons and fighting. And then later he enters this thing called the Academy, which traumatizes him because it's sort of like a military boot camp for the Drow, where, you know, he has to learn to channel all of his Jedi powers or his magic powers and all of his weapons training into, they take it serious. They don't, these Drow underground in the city of Menzoberranzan, they don't fuck around. They train you, and if you're a failure, they will just, you're done. I liked this. And then, of course, we have the Black Panther on the cover. We must not forget to mention the Black Panther, which is named Gwennifer, becomes Drizzt's sidekick. I was going into this novel not expecting much, and it way over delivered. This is when something under promises, but then way over delivers. I was charmed by this book like I didn't think I would be. I actually liked it quite a bit more than The Crystal Shard, book number 4. And I dug Crystal Shard. This book is almost, I loved the landscape. I loved learning about the Drow and the history of them and their dark brutality, and just charming. I don't know why it's charming. I mean, this is borderline grimdark stuff, and it's Dungeons and Dragons. It's perfect. Just a perfect little book. A+ for R.A. Salvatore. I'm gonna give this book a solid 9.5, maybe a 9.75, almost a 10. Just an absolute delightful start to one of the most legendary book series in the history of fantasy.